She slid a printed spreadsheet across the kitchen table like she was closing a loan on a stranger. Columns, rows, dollar amounts with little asterisks next to them. At the bottom, one line highlighted in yellow. "I just want us to be transparent," she said. "That's all." That was the moment I knew exactly what the last 16 months had been about. My name is Howard Calloway. I'm 71 years old. I spent 28 years running a small electrical shop in Indianapolis. Nothing fancy. Residential work, mostly. Well, some light commercial. I had 3 guys working for me at the peak. I knew every neighborhood on the east side of that city by which houses had knob and tube wiring still hiding in the walls. I retired at 68, with a pension that wasn't going to make anyone jealous, and Social Security that brought me to about $2,600 a month. I owned my house outright. I had savings. I had Beverly. Then I didn't have Beverly anymore. She died on a Thursday morning in April 2019. She'd had a headache the night before. Said it was from staring at her computer too long. We watched the news. Went to bed like we had 10,000 times before. At 2 a.m, I heard a sound I still can't describe right. Massive stroke. She was gone 3 days later, 68 years old. We had been married 41 years. I want to tell you I handled it with some kind of dignity. The truth is, I sat in our kitchen on Clover Hill Road for most of those first 3 days and didn't do much of anything. I didn't eat real food. As I didn't call people back. I just sat there looking at Beverly's coffee mug on the counter, the one with the chipped handle she'd had for 15 years, and absolutely refused to throw away. Said a little chip never hurt anybody. She was right about most things like that. Our son Neil called every day that first month. He lives up in Fort Wayne, about 2 hours north of Indianapolis. He'd married Sandra about 5 years before Beverly passed. Neil drives long-haul trucks. He's on the road 3 or 4 days most weeks. Sandra works as a loan officer at a regional bank. She's put together, precise, the kind of woman who reads a contract the way other people read a menu. Every line, no skimming. The calls were good at first. Neil would ask how I was eating, how I was sleeping. I'd say fine. He'd tell me about the kids. Tyler was 9 that summer and already deep into baseball stats. Not just scores, but launch angles, exit velocity, things I had to look up. Grace was 6 and had developed a near-scientific obsession with marine biology. She told me once over the phone that octopuses have 3 hearts and blue blood, and that she intended to study them when she grew up. I said that sounded like a fine plan. I missed those kids more than I expected to. The house on Clover Hill Road had 3 bedrooms. Beverly and I bought it in 1991 when Neil was 4 years old. After she was gone, walk from room to room some evenings, and the whole place felt like a building that had lost whatever was holding it together. Everything still standing. Nothing quite right. Sandra started joining the calls around that fall. She was warmer than I expected, honestly. Asked about my health, said they worried about me out there alone. She mentioned that their house in Fort Wayne had a finished basement, private entrance, its own full bathroom, a small kitchenette. They'd been using it for storage, but it wouldn't take much to clear out. I said that was kind of them. I wasn't ready to make any decisions. Well, she said, of course, no pressure at all. I believed her. That's the part I come back to most. I genuinely believed her. What actually got me moving was a ladder and a bad angle. About 14 months after Beverly passed, I was up on a ladder in the garage trying to replace a junction box that had been bothering me for years. Came down wrong, caught my left foot on the bottom rung, and put out my right hand to catch myself. Broke my wrist in 2 places. Sat on the garage floor for a while before I could get up and get to the phone. Sandra called that evening. Neil had told her. She said she'd been worried about exactly this kind of thing. She said the offer still stood. She said it wasn't charity, it was family. Neil got on the line and said, Dad, just come. Please. I packed a bag that weekend. I told myself it was temporary, just while the wrist healed up. I drove up to Fort Wayne on a Sunday afternoon in late June. As Neil was on a run to Cleveland, but Sandra had the basement set up, and the kids were waiting in the driveway when I pulled in. Tyler showed me his pitching stats from his last Little League game before I had my bag inside. Grace had drawn a picture of a blue whale and taped it to the door of my room downstairs. I stood there looking at that drawing and thought maybe this wasn't such a bad idea after all. I should have known better, but I didn't. Not yet. That first summer in Fort Wayne was genuinely good. I want to be straight about that, because none of what came later makes sense, unless you understand that it started out real. Neil grilled on Saturdays when he was home. Nothing complicated. Burgers, chicken, corn on the cob. We'd sit out back while the kids ran around the yard, and it felt like something I hadn't had in over a year. Sandra made this lemon chicken one Sunday that I still think about. She was a good cook when she had the time, which wasn't often with her hours at the bank. As I settled into a routine fast. I'm an early riser by nature. 28 years of electrical work will do that to you, because the good jobs start at 7 and the traffic doesn't care about your schedule. I'd be up at 5:30, make coffee, sit at the little table in the basement kitchenette, and read for an hour before the house woke up. It was quiet, in a way I hadn't had since Beverly died. Not lonely quiet. Just quiet. 3 days a week I picked Tyler and Grace up from school. Sandra's hours at the bank had gotten longer. She was handling more commercial accounts, and Neil's routes were unpredictable enough that they couldn't count on him for pickups. I didn't mind. Tyler would talk baseball statistics from the school parking lot all the way home without taking a breath. Grace had started keeping a spiral notebook she called her ocean journal, and she'd read me entries on the drive. 1 week, she spent 4 days documenting everything she could find about bioluminescent plankton. I learned more about plankton that week than I ever expected to know. Those drives were the best part of my day. I also helped around the house the way I always have. It's just how I'm built. When the back fence gate came off its hinge in July, I fixed it that afternoon. When Sandra mentioned the bathroom faucet upstairs was running slow, I pulled the aerator, cleaned it out, done in 10 minutes. I bought Tyler new cleats when his old pair split at the sole 2 weeks into fall baseball. I bought Grace a set of watercolor paints she'd been asking about. I restocked the garage with basic supplies because I noticed they were out of half a dozen things a house needs, and nobody had noticed. I wasn't keeping track. That was my first real mistake. In August, Neil mentioned I should think about selling the Clover Hill Road house. The Indianapolis market had been strong all year, and he said holding an empty house meant property taxes, insurance, upkeep, money going out with nothing coming back. He wasn't wrong about any of it. I sat with the idea for about 3 weeks, made a list the way I always do when I'm avoiding a decision, then looked at the list and called a realtor anyway. I listed the house in October. It sold in 9 days. After the mortgage was paid off, there was still a small balance, and after the realtor fees and the repairs I'd done before listing, I cleared $185,000. I put it in my savings account and didn't touch it. That was mine and Beverly's money. Every job I'd ever done, every Saturday I'd worked instead of taking off. Every year we'd paid extra on that mortgage. It sat in the account, and I tried not to think about it too hard. A few months later, in February, Neil and Sandra sat me down after the kids were in bed. Neil did the opening. He said the roof on the house had been a problem since before they bought it, patched twice in 6 years, and the last inspection said it needed full replacement. He said they'd looked at financing options, but the interest rates were bad timing, and they didn't want to take on more debt right now. He wasn't asking, he said. He just wanted me to know what was going on because I was family, and they didn't keep things from family. Sandra didn't say much that night. She let Neil talk. She sat with her hands folded on the table and nodded in the right places. I thought about Beverly. I thought about what she'd want for those grandkids. In that house, with a solid roof over their heads. I thought about $185,000 sitting in an account I wasn't spending. I told them I'd cover the roof. $22,000. I said it was a gift, not a loan, and I meant it completely. Neil shook my hand. Sandra stood up and hugged me and said I was the most generous man she'd ever known. The roof got done in April. Good job, 30-year shingles. I watched them work from the driveway one morning with my coffee and felt like I'd done something real. That feeling didn't last as long as it should have. Looking back now, I can see exactly how the next part worked. It didn't happen fast. That's the thing I'd want anyone in my position to understand. It never happens fast. It's always slow, always reasonable sounding, always one small step that makes sense on its own. It's only when you write it all down later that you see the shape of it. It started with utilities in November. Sandra mentioned at dinner one evening that the gas and electric bills had gone up since summer. Bigger house than their last place, she said. More square footage to heat. She was looking at her plate when she said it, not at me. Just mentioning it, the way you mentioned the weather. I offered $200 a month. She said it wasn't necessary. I said I wanted to contribute. I was using the heat and the lights, same as everyone. Neil said, "Thank you, Dad." Sandra smiled and said that was very generous. By February, I'd added the cable and internet bill since I was using it as much as anyone in the house. That brought me to $350 a month. In the spring, Sandra set up a shared grocery account. More efficient, she explained. She could order everything in one delivery instead of multiple trips. Made sense on paper. I put $500 a month in. I was also buying Tyler's gear when he needed it, covering Grace's Marine Science Day camp that summer, paying for the occasional repair before anyone asked. The backyard swing set I bought in June because the kids had mentioned it twice, and I wanted to be the kind of grandfather who shows up. By fall, I was putting in close to $900 a month in cash alone. Not counting the school pickups, the fence repairs, the faucets, the cleats, the watercolor paints. I thought I was earning my place. I thought that was the same thing as belonging somewhere. It isn't. My old friend Leonard called me on a Wednesday afternoon in October, out of nowhere. We'd been neighbors for 11 years back on Clover Hill Road before he retired and moved out to a smaller place east of the city. We talked maybe 3 or 4 times a year. He'd heard through someone that I'd sold the house and moved up to Fort Wayne, and he was just calling to check in the way men our age do. Not because anything's wrong, just to make sure nothing is. I told him the setup. Basement unit, private entrance, picking up the grandkids, helping around the house. I told him about the roof and the $22,000. I told him about the monthly contributions. I was talking about it the way I'd come to think about it, as a reasonable arrangement, as me pulling my weight. Leonard listened without saying much. When I finished, he was quiet for a second. Then he said, "You doing all that and still living in their basement?" I said I had my own entrance, my own bathroom. It wasn't really a basement the way people picture one. He said, "Howard, and a man who owns nothing owns himself nothing either." I didn't have a good answer for that. We talked for a few more minutes about other things, his garden, a truck his nephew was trying to sell him. And then we hung up. But I thought about what he said for the rest of that day and into the evening. I couldn't quite shake it. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning in November, I found out why. Neil was on a run down to Cincinnati. He'd left before 5 a.m. Sandra had made coffee, both cups already on the table when I came upstairs, which I noticed but didn't think much of at the time. She sat down across from me and said she wanted to have an honest conversation about the household finances. I said, "Okay." She started the way she always started things. Reasonable, measured, The same tone she probably used at the bank when she was walking a customer through a loan they couldn't quite afford. Sorry. She said the mortgage was tighter than they'd expected when they bought the place. She said between the car payments and Tyler's fall baseball league and Grace's school fees, they were feeling stretched in ways they hadn't anticipated. Then she reached beside her chair and put a printed spreadsheet on the table. I want to describe this right because it matters. It wasn't a scribbled note. It wasn't a rough estimate. It was a formatted document, columns with headers, rows broken down by category, percentage allocations by household member. She had calculated the square footage of my basement unit as a proportion of the total house. She had pulled rental comps from 3 zip codes in Fort Wayne. She had a column showing projected monthly income if the unit were rented to a tenant on the open market. $1,400 to $1,600, she said, was a conservative estimate. At the bottom of the page, highlighted in yellow, proposed contribution from H. Calloway, $1,000 per month. I sat with that for a moment. Then she turned the page over. There was a second document. She called it an investment opportunity. She and a colleague at the bank were putting together a small real estate holding, a rental property on the north side of Fort Wayne. She said she'd structured it carefully. She said my principal would be protected. She said $45,000 from my savings, properly placed, could generate returns I wasn't getting in a low-yield savings account. She said it was a way for my money to work for me. She said she thought of it as doing me a favor. She slid both documents across the table and folded her hands and waited. I looked at those pages for a long time. I asked if Neil had seen them. She said they'd discussed everything together. I said I'd need some time to think it over. She said, of course, she completely understood. She just wanted to be transparent. She said that word again. Transparent. Like a window you can see right through. I took my coffee downstairs. I didn't drink it. I sat in the basement for a while, and then I went out to the garage. I have a big red toolbox I've had since 1987. Bought it the year I started the business. It's got a dent on the left side from a job in 1993, where a ceiling beam came down faster than expected, and it's got stickers on it from a hardware supplier that went out of business 15 years ago. I moved that toolbox from every house I ever lived in. It came up to Fort Wayne in the back of my truck when I moved in. I sat on an overturned bucket next to it and put my hand on the top of it and just stayed there. Beverly would have known exactly what to say. She always did. 2 sentences, the right ones, no extra words. I'm not built like that. I need time to let things settle before I can see them clearly. What I could see clearly, sitting in that garage, was the toolbox. What I could see was that in 16 months in this house, I had never once opened it for myself. Every repair I'd done had been for their faucets, their fence, their appliances. My tools had been sitting in that box untouched since the day I arrived. That night I called my sister Donna. She lives in Tucson, Arizona. She was Beverly's closest friend for 30 years before she was my sister-in-law, which means her advice comes from a place of complete honesty with no ashoning. She let me talk for about 20 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question. She said, "Howard, when's the last time you did something just for yourself in that house?" I thought about it. I couldn't come up with an answer. She said, "Don't ask permission for things that are already yours." After I hung up, I got a yellow legal pad from my desk drawer. I still use legal pads, always have, and I started writing things down. Not for any particular reason at first, just to see what the shape of it looked like on paper. And the shape of it was not what I'd been telling myself it was. Gift for the roof, $22,000, monthly contributions over 16 months, at an average of around $800, roughly $12,800. Grocery account contributions, $8,000. Repairs, kids' gear, school supplies, the swing set, the baseball leagues, Grace's camp, Christmas, birthdays, another $6,000 at minimum. Childcare, 3 days a week, every week, 16 months at any reasonable market rate, $7,500. Probably more. And I added it up 3 times because I didn't believe it the first 2. Just under $56,000. In 16 months. And now there was a highlighted yellow line asking for $1,000 more a month, and a second page asking me to hand over $45,000 on top of that. I put the legal pad in the drawer and didn't sleep well that night. I gave it a week. I went about my routine the way I always had. Made my coffee at 5:30. Picked up Tyler and Grace on Wednesday. Helped Grace glue together a model of a sperm whale she'd been working on for her ocean journal. Watched Neil leave for a 3-day run to Memphis on Thursday morning. Ate dinner with Sandra on Friday, like 2 people who hadn't sat across from each other with a spreadsheet between them 6 days earlier. She was pleasant about it. That was the thing I kept noticing. No pressure, no follow-up questions, no hard looks across the table. Just pleasant. The same way a bank stays pleasant while your loan application is under review. Saturday morning, I texted Neil and asked if he wanted to get breakfast when he got back. Just the 2 of us. He said sure, and I could tell from the way he responded, one word, a little slow, that he'd been waiting for that text. We met at a diner about 3 miles from the house. Booths, bad lighting, good coffee. The kind of place that's been in the same spot for 30 years and doesn't need to advertise. We ordered coffee and eggs and made small talk until the food came. Then I put my legal pad on the table. I didn't read from it. I just wanted it there. I told Neil I loved him. I told him that living close to Tyler and Grace had been the best thing in my life since I lost his mother, and that nothing about what I was going to say next changed that. Then I walked him through the numbers. All of them. The roof, the monthly contributions, the groceries, the repairs, the kids' expenses, the childcare. Every line. I told him what the legal pad said, and I told him what the spreadsheet Sandra had given me said, and I laid both pictures out on the table, and I let him look at them. Neil is a smart man. He drives a truck for a living, but don't mistake that for anything other than what it is. A man who chose a job he's good at, and that pays him well enough to own a 4-bedroom house and raise 2 kids. He's not slow and he's not checked out. He knew those numbers. I could see it the moment I started talking. Not surprise on his face, but something closer to relief that it was finally being said out loud. He was quiet for a while after I finished. He drank his coffee. He looked at the window. And he said Sandra handled most of the day-to-day finances, that she was better at it than he was, and he'd let her take the lead for most of their marriage. I said I understood that. I said it still didn't explain how we got to a printed spreadsheet and an investment proposal across the kitchen table. He put his cup down and said, "I know, Dad, I know." He meant it. I'm certain of that. He's a good man who got comfortable handing off decisions he should have stayed involved in, and somewhere in that comfort a door opened that shouldn't have. I spent a long time deciding that's not my problem to fix. I told him I'd been looking at townhouses. I had already spoken to an agent the week before, quietly, without telling anyone. I'd seen 3 places. There was one about 15 minutes away. 2 bedrooms, a garage, a back patio. Solid construction, decent neighborhood, but I could pay for it outright. No mortgage, no payment. Mine. He looked up then. He started to say something and then he didn't. He asked if I was angry. I thought about that for a real moment before I answered. I told him I wasn't angry the way people mean when they ask that. I was clear about what had happened, and clear about what I needed to do next. Anger is what you feel when something catches you off guard. I hadn't been caught off guard in quite some time. I'd just been slow to admit what I was seeing. He nodded. He picked up the check before I could reach for it. It was a small thing, but I noticed it. When I told them both together that I'd be moving out in 8 weeks, Sandra said she was sorry to hear that and hoped nothing had been misunderstood. I said there was no misunderstanding at all. I let the silence sit where it landed. Those 8 weeks were polite and strange in equal measure. Sandra was cordial. Neil was quieter than usual, but present. He took fewer long runs during those 2 months. One which I noticed and didn't comment on. About 2 weeks before I moved, I sat down with Tyler and Grace and told them that Grandpa was getting his own place nearby. I told them it had a garage where I could teach Tyler how basic electrical work operates if he was ever curious. Grace asked immediately whether she could bring her fish tank. I said she could bring it any time she wanted and that I'd help her set it up. Tyler asked if he could come over on Wednesdays still. I said Wednesdays were his. I moved into the townhouse on a Friday morning in late January. Neil helped me load the truck. We didn't talk much, but it was easy between us in a way it hadn't been in months. The toolbox went in last. I set it in the corner of the garage myself. That first night I ordered a pizza and sat at my own kitchen table and ate it without explaining anything to anyone. The next morning I woke up at 5:30, the same as always, made coffee in my own kitchen, and sat at the window watching the sky get light. No spreadsheet, no shared account, no footsteps upstairs, just the sound of the house and my own breathing. Then I noticed the kitchen faucet had a slow drip. I went out to the garage, opened the red toolbox for the first time since I'd moved to Fort Wayne, found the right washers in the third tray where they've always been, and had the faucet fixed in 20 minutes. First thing I'd repaired for myself in almost 2 years. I stood at that sink and turned the handle on and off twice just to hear it stop clean. I see Tyler and Grace twice a week now, sometimes 3 times. Wednesdays I still pick them up. We stop for ice cream on the way back, and Tyler talks pitching mechanics for 45 minutes, and I listen to every word. Grace brought her fish tank over in February. We set it up in the second bedroom together, and she's named every fish after a different marine biologist. And the biggest one is named after a woman who spent 40 years studying deep-sea creatures nobody else believed existed. I think that's about right. Neil and I have talked more honestly in the 4 months since I moved out than in the 2 years I lived in that basement. The kind of conversations you can only have when nobody needs something from the other person. He's admitted that things went in a direction he should have caught earlier. I believe him. We're finding our way back to what we were before all of it, which was just a father and a son who liked watching football and didn't need much else. Sandra is civil, polite at family dinners, pleasant when I pick up the kids. We will not be close. I've made peace with that completely. She wanted financial security, and she went after it the best way she knew how. That's a separate conversation from whether what she did was right. When my savings are in my account with my name on them, and they are going to stay there. Donna called last week to check in. She asked how I was sleeping. I told her the truth for the first time in a long time. I said I was sleeping fine. Leonard called the week before that. I told him about the townhouse, the garage, the faucet. He laughed that slow laugh of his and said, "Now you're living right, Howard." Yeah, I think that's about right. Beverly would have said I took too long to get here, and she would have said it without being unkind about it, the way she said most true things. She was right about most things. She usually was. I spent 2 years confusing being needed with being valued, and the day I stopped being available for everything was the day I remembered who I actually was. Generosity is a choice, but so is knowing when the giving has stopped being love and started being something someone else just got used to.